Every time you read a great book, it's easy to believe the author behind it is some unbelievable creative genius who operates on a completely different level compared to your average human being. But the truth is, behind every good book is a real person, a real human being. Someone with doubts, strange ideas, messy experiences, wild stories, and a life that shaped every page they wrote. So, welcome to Authors by Us, the podcast where we go beyond the book. Here we sit down with authors not just to talk about what they wrote, although we will talk about that, but about the stories, experiences, opinions, and moments that shape them into who they are today. By the end of the conversation, we want you as the audience walking away feeling like the author you once admired from a distance can now be one of your closest friends that you could now grab a cup of coffee with. So if you love books, stories, or the people behind them, make sure to hit subscribe and let's meet today's author. Real quick, before this episode starts, I want to be as transparent with you guys as much as possible. So unfortunately, in this episode, we dealt with two technical difficulties, and we're going to be making sure that these technical difficulties don't happen in the future with future guests. But this episode was so good. The conversation was so insane that I really couldn't bring myself to delete it. And I wanted you guys to have this conversation. So because of that, we are still giving you guys this episode, but there is a slight echo in the episode. Just to let you know, we were able to clean it up for the most part, but it's still there a very, very tiny bit, which is super unfortunate, but I promise you guys moving forward, this will no longer be an issue. And then for number two, my guest had some technical difficulties of her own. So because of that, we had to record a second part. So when you see a different cut happen about an hour in, somewhere around there, that means that is where part two happens, but you still are getting the full conversation. So hopefully you guys still enjoy. We are going to ensure that these technical difficulties do not happen in future episodes. And with that, now let's meet today's author. With me today, I have, is your real name Amber?
It is Ember,
Ember.
with an E.
Okay. Wow. That's interesting. Do you know where that name came from?
Not really.
Not really.
Nope, I've never really asked where, they came up with it. I just think it's pretty and never really cared what my parents had in mind.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those names where I would expect, or I would at least think there's some kind of reasoning behind it. So it's a unique enough name for it, I guess I should say. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I was really excited to get you on, especially after our little discussion on TikTok. I wanted to start off
Yeah.
by asking you a little bit about that. For those who don't know who you are, or at least want to get to know a little bit more about you, who are you?
I am Ember Rose. I am the author of the Crime of Passion series, which is a dark romance series revolving around law enforcement. My book, Save Me Brooks, just came out February 9th. It is about a rookie deputy and a 911 dispatcher who go through some stuff, but in the end, they always end up together in romance books.
911 dispatcher and an author. That is quite the resume. Where does the connection come into play there? Because I'm I know for many in the audience, they're going to wonder, how do you go from 911 dispatch where you're probably taking a bunch of dark calls? We won't go too far into that as per your wish,
Right.
but you're taking all these dark calls and then all of a sudden, boom, I'm writing a book. Where is that connection?
So I took college level creative writing in high school. It's always been something that has been near and dear to my heart. My passion for writing started in middle school when my grandma she would have my cousin and I write cursive letters back and forth to each other just to practice cursive. We were actually like the last class that was taught how to write cursive, and she didn't want us to forget how. So the creative writing was engraved deep in me from an early age. I grew up around law enforcement. My dad is in law enforcement. So Naturally, I took a liking to it, wanted to get into it. I got into it, and I was in a huge avid reader of dark romance or cozy romances, and I had brought up in a conversation with one of my coworkers that I had always wanted to write a book, and that I actually wrote like 15 probably books in middle school, between middle school and high school, that never got published. And she kind of looked at me and like gave me this odd, like confused look and was like, "So why don't you?" And when she asked me why don't I didn't really have an answer other than I work full time. She is actually my supervisor, so she was like, "So just right here." And so I did, and I wrote on my 12-hour shifts during work. Nothing in the book is real, it is all based on fiction. So no one has to worry about their name showing up in there or anything. It is all coincidence if it did. But yeah, that is where that came from. I went from it being a dream to the why don't you and jumping headfirst in that night. She actually set up my Google Doc, sent me the way that she set it up for future books so that I would be able to do it myself. She got me started.
That's that is quite the story. I love that so much. You said you mentioned that I know in our text and on TikTok you mentioned that your supervisor, I didn't know she was your supervisor, but she
Right.
told you there wasn't a bunch of representation of law enforcement in this sort of
Yeah.
romancy style. Why do you think there's not much representation? Is it just because there's not enough people who are in your line of work, or do you think it's some other deep reasoning?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think given the climate of our nation at this time, and our world really at this time, law enforcement isn't as popular right now. And I mean, I can't say that I blame them. I try to remain neutral in politics. However, I jump back and forth on views, which I know can be iffy for some people, but I believe in what I believe in. But the law enforcement and first responders in general is highly understaffed, at least in America. I feel like a lot of departments don't have the funding for as many officers and employees as they need, which leaves them running short.
Hmm.
I knew that going into it, a lot of people always say, like, oh, I like a man in uniform. So I'm trying to bring those books to life where you get to see the man in uniform, you get to see the girls having their happy ending. Most of my female main characters are very headstrong, dominant women who could probably handle themselves, and then the men are almost always going to be some form of first responder. That is just my passion. After I finish the Crime of Passion series, I actually have planned out a fire department series. It doesn't have a name yet. We will go, into a lot of, if not all of, first responder and maybe even medical careers. And you're going to be able to see all of those hopefully by the time I finish all of my series.
That's awesome. It almost reminds me, I know you mentioned you don't watch a lot of cop shows due to what you do, but it almost
Right.
reminds me of a series that I saw, and it became one of my favorite cop emergency series called
Hmm.
911.
Hmm.
And in that series, they do a really good job of showcasing everything from fire department to police officer to dispatchers.
Right.
And dispatchers getting represented is something that you don't see very often, which is
Right.
why, as soon as you said it, that you work as a dispatcher, my mind was just blown. And it was funny, I gave you that stereotypical, oh, you like cop shows, that's what the inspiration was. And then you told me, oh, I'm actually working as a
Yeah,
dispatcher.
I
And I thought,
am. Yes.
holy, but my question is, you said your father was a
Mhm.
or is a deputy.
Mhm. Yes, he is.
Was he supportive about you getting into this line of work? Because I would assume most people wouldn't want, especially their immediate family, to get into this kind of work.
So I started 911. I was at a different department than I am now, straight out of high school. Like literally, I think 2 days after high school graduation, I started. So not really. He warned me a lot about the mental toll that it could have on people. Realistically, I listened to him a little bit, put it aside. The only thing that is good and that he was happy about was he can talk to someone now about work that will fully understand without judgment. Obviously, he could talk to his coworkers, but at a certain point, you want to come home and kind of debrief some of that. And we both have someone, which my brother is now in law enforcement as a correctional officer. So we have the three of us where we can just chat and debrief a little bit on like rough calls and stuff, which he was happy about that. However, growing up, he always told my brother and I to not get into law enforcement, and then that's exactly what we did.
Family legacy I see going on
Yeah.
here. Real quick, I know you said you have a couple children.
Yeah, I have a son and a stepson. They are three. My son is three, and then my fiance's son is two.
Do you think they're proud of what you've accomplished so far, or do you think they will be as they get older?
My son tells me that he's proud of me anytime that I get a new certificate or something that he sees go up on the wall. But he is was raised where any small accomplishment, I told him I was proud of him. But yeah, I do think that when he grows up and realizes everything that I had to overcome to get here and everything I had to do to support him, he'd probably be extremely proud of me. My stepson doesn't talk a whole lot. He talks, but he doesn't. I don't think we're at that point yet where we understand the concept of proud and not proud quite yet. But I hope someday, yes, they'll both look back and they'll be like, oh wow, she did that for us. And they would not be wrong. I did everything I do, the extra trainings that I try to do for them. Everything is to further myself so that they can have a better life.
That's awesome. Speaking of overcoming challenges, let's discuss a little bit about your book here.
Yeah.
What would you say were the major challenges that you had when you were initially starting? And then when you got to that midpoint of your book where you were thinking, oh, this is a real thing, this is actually happening.
Yeah.
But what were those challenges that you faced along the way?
So, writer's block hit me really hard. Um, I took about 2 months off from writing just because I was at a point where, even though the book was plotted out, I didn't know how to put it into words, which majorly pushed back the release timeline, but um, I wouldn't have changed it for anything. It helped me. I did some creative writing exercises and stuff. I think it made me a better author. Um, I also have my son 50% of the time, so there are weeks where I have my son and no break from my son or work.
Hmm.
And then there are weeks where I don't have him and I have short breaks from work. Um, so finding the time to sit down and write and then overcoming the writer's block were huge like not milestones, but huge obstacles.
Yeah.
Because at the time he was two, just turning three when I was writing it. So it was always wanting to be stuck to mom's side. And I love it. I love spending time with him. He actually has a chair in the office now where he comes and sits while
That's
I'm writing
cute.
if he wants to see me.
Yeah.
Um, but he is also a lot more independent now and likes to play by himself or just have the TV on while he's playing. So now I don't have as many obstacles, but there at the beginning, it felt like I had my soul sister watching him at my house all the time while I was trying to write. And I probably would not have gotten through it without her because it was a lot trying to raise a toddler, work full time, and write.
Yeah, I was about to ask, that was going to be my next question. You beat me to it. How I know I saw on your TikTok you had a meme piece of content where it showed where there was a narrator saying that how do you find time to do all this, and you're standing there just like I don't. And I'm sitting here thinking you got a full-time job, you've got a
Yeah.
family to raise. and you're trying to write a book on top of all that, which I've talked with plenty of authors, just writing a book is hard enough. How? Just how were you even able to just navigate the time alone? Because we only have 24 hours a day. How are you navigating? I got a full-time job. I've got my boyfriend, I've got my children, and then I've got to write this book, and oh my goodness. And on top of that, you wrote the book in 6 months.
I did.
How?
I wrote a lot at work. I was averaging probably around 5 to 6,000 words a day at work, um, just trying to get it done. And then, like I said, my soul sister would come over and watch him. I'd probably get 1 to 2,000 words written a day
Mm,
with him, at home. And then when on the 2 days that I get fully off on the week where I don't have my son, the 2 days that I don't work at all, I usually spend time with my parents, but on those days I was averaging roughly 10,000 words trying to fit it all in.
wow, that's a lot. By the way, I saw you talked about how you have a series planned here, and then you plan on doing more of a series later to sort of even build a bigger world beyond what's currently going on with Save Me Brooks. When did you realize this was going to be a series? Was it just immediate right off the bat, or were you kind of in the middle of writing and then you went, you know what? This could actually be a series.
It was almost immediately off the bat when I was planning out Save Me Brooks. With all of the stuff that happens, I figured that other characters also deserve some spotlight. So in Save Me Brooks, Sophia has a sister named Faith, and Faith goes through a lot of trauma. I mean, they both do, but Faith's side deserves to be heard. So she is getting her own book with her own happy ending that she has deserved from the start, really. I put that poor girl through a lot. And then I plan on at least two more, one of which may be a prequel where it dives deeper into the happenings prior to the book Save Me Brooks starting.
Mm.
But yeah, the next book is going to be Faith. Going through some of her trauma and finally getting her happy ending, which she needs.
It seems like you are very in tune with your characters, and from a lot of the interviews that I've watched and that I've done myself, I've come to understand that a lot of authors, they tend to have at least that one character that is so difficult to write, and it can be for any reason, whether it's they just don't gel with the character, maybe they don't have that personality. There's just plenty
Right.
of reasons. Was there ever a character while you were writing your first book, or maybe with your second book that you're writing now, was there a character that you were just like, oh my God, I cannot write about this character to save my life?
Ironically, it was Sophia. Sophia
Okay.
was the hardest to write, but I started writing her based off of my plot, and then she kind of took over and wrote her own story, which is what kind of made it harder. So I had planned, please ignore my phone going off. My fiance just got home. My original plan was for her to be more um, shy, submissive, and scared. And as I was writing, I think that a lot of my personality came out in her, and that's just not who I am. So that's not who Sophia became. She
Mm.
became a very dominant, hard headed, stubborn, want it now kind of person. And I loved that, but at the same time, it changed a lot about what I had planned because I had to fix certain aspects to fit
Mm.
around who she became.
Okay, interesting. How much of your life, or your work, I should say, really played a role in writing the book? I know earlier you said that your book is plainly fictitious. It's fiction. There's no real life events. It's not like you're writing a biography. But how much of your work actually played a part in writing this in terms of how deep you were able to go into your repertoire of what you've dealt with on your job?
So none of the calls that I have ever dealt with are inside of the book. The only thing we would get close to would be a domestic violence call, which is in the book. But that kind of triggers some trauma for her,
Mhm.
and she falls into, I would like to call it shock, from that call. Other than that, a lot of my personal life went into it. A lot of my past trauma and issues that I had to overcome went into it. Like I said, Sophia was kind of a passion character for me. She was based a lot around me. So even though the story was fictitious, she's a 911 dispatcher, she's in an abusive relationship trying to overcome that. That kind of stuff was real. It's happened to me.
Mhm.
I mean, not all of the trauma that those two go through, those two being Faith and Sophia, has happened to me. Personally, I have never had a family member kidnapped, and Sophia did. So, a lot of my personal characteristics and some of my personal past trauma went into the book, but not a lot of the work aspects. The most that probably went into it, like I said, was the domestic violence call and her shutting down. But as for trying to use the proper termage and all of that, verbiage, I guess, and
Yeah.
all of that, that all was probably the closest I got to actually putting work into the book.
Yeah, and I'm honestly I'm sorry about again, I don't know what you went through personally, but I'm sorry nonetheless. I don't want to go as far as to say you're through with it, you're done with it, because of course trauma is something that
Right.
we all deal with in different ways. Would you have a piece of advice for anyone out there, since we're on this topic, that could help them to at least kind of start getting through it in a certain way?
Find your support system or your form of therapy. I know therapy is really expensive. For me, my therapy has always been reading, but find your support system and lean on and rely on them, trust them. Might not feel like telling them everything, but as much as you feel comfortable sharing, share. Um, don't take their advice as personal attacks because they're not. They're just trying to help. And honestly, we all need help once in a while. We all go through trauma once in a while. So, leaning on and relying on your closest support system, whether that be friends, coworkers, family, whatever. Personally, writing helped a lot with getting some of that emotion out. I could have an awful day at work and be able to write an amazing emotion packed scene that had nothing to do with work, but I'd be able to let my emotions out on paper and not have to hold it in anymore.
That's awesome. I definitely appreciate that. And it's something that we all, even those who haven't been through much, it's something we all need is some kind of support system. You talked about how reading and writing helped you a lot in those kinds of circumstances. How so?
So, when I was getting bullied in like late elementary school, early middle school, my grandma would always read to me. So, she sparked my love of reading just like she sparked my love of writing. I would throw myself into books to kind of take my mind off of what was going on in real life. And that just is how that started, I guess. I'd be able to kind of forget what was going on in real life and picture the fantasy worlds that were being painted in front of me or the fake scenarios in the books painted in front of me, and it would help a lot just being able to dissociate for a little bit and not have to worry about what was going on around me.
Okay. Yeah, and I can tell now, I can see where the reading comes in. Would you consider yourself, well, okay, you have a book talk account.
I do.
You've probably seen all of those posts about people saying how many books per month, per year, etc. that they read. How many books would you say that you actually read now that you've become more of an avid reader?
Last year I think I read 30, which wasn't as much as I want to. My goal this year is 50. We're off to a slow start, but when I finish writing my books, I'm able to read a lot more. And the time that it takes for them to get edited, covers to be made, getting it formatted, all of that. that is the best time for me to read. I can usually read a book in about a day, maybe two, depending on how large it was.
What's your favorite book that you've ever read?
So it
By the way,
is,
not including yours.
I have not, it might shock you. I have not read through my book all of the way since editing was finished.
Mm.
In book format, I have not read through it all of the way. I have read it, I have annotated some of it, have not read through it all of the way. I feel like if I would get burnout. Or I would find something that I was like, man, I could have done that better. And
Hmm.
instead of wanting to tear down myself as an author and my book, I've decided not to read it for right now. My favorite book, though, outside of mine, I have it right here, is Haunting and Hunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton. I got to meet her in person at a meet and greet. I have, I think, almost all of the special edition copies, which is insane. This is both books in one. It's
Mm.
ginormous. But Haunting and Hunting Adeline helped me a lot. I was going through my divorce and all of that when I started reading it, and to be able to read it and see like characters kind of going through worse situations made me feel a little bit better about my situation. But it is my favorite. She is my favorite author outside of myself, but I have met her. She is such a sweet human being.
Yeah, H.D. Carlton, Haunting Adeline. I read Phantom recently. Great books, by the
Yes.
way. Everyone should definitely check her out. She's a great author. How much of an effect did she have on you to truly want to become an author? And when did you meet her, by the way?
I met her July of 2024.
Okay.
When I met her, I told her, obviously, like any fan would, oh, I love your books and I've always wanted to write. And she told me that even if I don't publish a book, every story deserves to be brought to life, whether that's for myself or for others. And that really resonated a lot with me because that is, again, kind of what my grandma always thought, as well as my creative writing teacher. My book in the dedication is dedicated to my seventh grade English teacher. And that would be because she said the exact same thing that Haley said when I met her. She had always said, every story deserves to be heard, whether that be just you hearing it and writing it down or you actually publishing it and bringing it to life.
Okay.
So, her tied into my coworker, they were the two biggest inspirations for it. Yeah. So, Haley really helped my author career a lot, inspired me so deeply with her entire line of books. I own all of them. And I have read every single one of them at least twice. But listening re-listening to the audiobooks while I was writing kept me going, knowing that I am not alone in my struggles as an author.
Yeah, and by the way, that's a great story. That kind of leads me to the question of you got inspired by a couple of people who you either became friends with or you were close with, and as a result, you now wrote this book within 6 months and you're now working on your next one. What
I
would you
am.
say to someone, which, by the way, congratulations, that is a huge accomplishment.
Thank you.
What would you say to someone who is trying to, maybe they have a story, maybe they, honestly, maybe there's someone who just doesn't think they have stories, they don't have the creativeness or they don't have the repertoire to be able to get out there and write their own book, but they want to. What would you say to someone like that?
So I would say the same thing that I was told by Haley and my English teacher. Every story deserves to be at least written, brought to life, because if you leave it in your head, you can forget things. And honestly, some of the best stories are stories that were never published and stories that no one is ever going to hear. I do have a friend who wrote a book and had a personal copy made. However, she never plans to publish it. As it's for her, and that's all that she needed. It was her way of coping with some stuff she was going through. Fully supportive of that. Not everyone wants to be a published author, but everyone has a story that deserves to be told, and I believe that wholeheartedly. So, even if you don't think you're good at writing, everyone has to start somewhere. Practice makes perfect. If you want to be an author and you don't think that you're good with grammar, that's what editors are for. Find an editor that you trust, whose style that you like, and I promise they're going to make your book something beyond what you could have ever dreamed.
That's awesome advice. That's awesome advice. Speaking of editors and all of that, I don't know if you fully want to get into it, but and you don't have to go too far into it, but how much did it cost you to just fund your first book?
I had an editor who has now removed all of her business pages and sites, so I'm not going to name her just due to I'm still dealing with her. I paid her roughly $2,500 to edit my book, and then she just ghosted me.
Oh,
I
I'm sorry.
found it's all good. I found an amazing editor named Holly with Ebb and Flow Editing. I think you can find her on Threads and Instagram. She's an amazing human being. She heard what I was going through, reached out to me, and I immediately booked with her just due to some of the things that she said. She made my book amazing. She is affordable. I think in total it cost me just getting started. I didn't have any knowledge on what I was supposed to be doing. Roughly $5,000 in total. Now that wasn't her fee, that's with cover design, editing, the editor who skipped out on me. I took some author classes, so that all plays into it. Um, I run ads every once in a while, so I try to add that stuff in there as well, just to be realistic. But roughly $5,000 probably.
We mentioned this before. It took you 6 months to complete this
It
book.
did.
I looked it up. Mm, On average, even for good authors, we're talking even some of the biggest names, Stephen King, all those guys. It can take them anywhere from a year and a half to three to complete their book, yet you completed it in 6 months. What do you think was the driving factor that made it just so much easier for you, especially with your busy schedule?
Determination. I was determined to get my book out um, before my birthday of this year, and I was able to do that successfully. I had a goal, and like I said, I'm a very headstrong person. So when I have a goal in mind, I am full force towards it. There is no stopping me, there is no changing my mind usually. I wanted to get the book done before I gave up was the biggest thing. I wanted to be published and I didn't want to give up on my dream. So I just forced myself. I forced myself to get up early every day or stay up later every night and find the time to do it. A lot of bigger name authors have book deals and do author events, and I would love to be there someday, but realistically right now I'm not.
So then, what is the goal besides obviously finishing books? What is that deep inner goal that you have moving forward now that you've completed your first book, you're on your way to going through the second? What is that inner goal that's just pushing you forward besides just, okay, I'm going to complete another book?
I would like to be a bestseller on a bestseller list, be able to say that I'm a best-selling indie author. I think it would be amazing. My goal is to inevitably make back the money that I spent creating the book, which I know can take a while. $5,000 is not a small amount. But my main goal And the driving force would be I want to be a best-selling author. I want to be in bookstores. I want to be at local stores like Walmart and Target or Meijer or wherever books are sold. I want to be there. I want to do author events. I want to be on those lists. And I want people to resonate with my stories because I know that there's someone who will.
And you're well on your way there. Yeah, I mean, you completed your first book. You're on your first podcast. Who
I
knows?
am.
The sky's the limit for you. How surreal was it though? To because when you're when you're writing and then you're reading it over, maybe you're making changes and all that. That's one thing. But how surreal was it when you got the physical copy in your hand for the first time and you just knew, wow, th- this is real.
I actually have a video of it. I videotaped myself opening my first physical copy, which we can see back there in the background. That is my very first physical copy. That is also the only copy that I have on hand right now because I am completely sold out of the first 40 author copies that I purchased.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been doing really good and I would like to say I'm not shocked, but I really am. It Holding that book felt amazing, incredible. It all became real in that moment. You would think that it would be real when you hit the like when you type the words the end, but
Yeah.
it's not. Or at least for me it wasn't. Holding that book in hand and knowing that other people would have it in hand at some point as well felt incredible. It felt really surreal. I cut the video off because I actually started crying and like holding it, looking over it, flipping through it. There are a lot of details that I added to that book that are just small details, but I think are beautiful and tie it together. And seeing them in person and not just on a computer was amazing. It brought a lot of joy.
You mentioned that there was a lot of details in the book and that there was the writing this book felt just so personal for you. Was there ever or which chapter, I should say, did you write out and you just went, yes, this is going to be the chapter that hits the absolute hardest? Maybe you don't want to spoil anything. I get it. People should
Right.
go buy the book. But is there a chapter that you looked at and you were just like, yes, this is going to be the chapter that's going to hit people the hardest? Because I know it hit me the hardest or whatever.
The getting away from the abusive relationship was very emotional. It was very action packed. That I think would be the chapter that hits the hardest emotionally. Physically, my favorite chapter is the locker room scene. There is a spicy scene in a locker room. That is my favorite. It shows a way that a lot of first responders I've met relieve stress. And that is just taking your mind off of it in whatever way possible. And I think that for first responders and for spicy book lovers, that will be the chapter that really draws them in.
Speaking of creativeness, did you have a title for your book just like that? Just immediately right off the bat? Or did you kind of just start writing the book and eventually you went, you know what, that title, that works?
So I played around with a few titles. Um, like I said, I was taking an author class, and the teacher told me Save Me Brooks would not be a popular title name and would probably never be a best-selling book, which drove me even more to want to reach that goal.
Yeah.
She suggested I change it to Crime of Passion, which is where the series name came from. Save Me Brooks came from just like the book idea itself, back and forth conversation with the same coworker. Um, we threw around ideas and landed on it, and it was the end. That was the title.
Nice. What's more difficult, writing a book or 911 dispatch calls?
I would say probably writing the book, if you want me to be honest.
Okay.
911 dispatch calls, you're trained on what to ask, to stay calm, and to just help people get through it over the phone until help can get there. That part of me, the mental load is probably worse, but the harder thing to do is definitely writing the book. Just because my training is so engraved in me, I've done it so long that to me, that is second nature. I can answer that phone and I immediately know what I'm going to say. I hear what's going on. I know where I'm sending them. I can get them started, and then the secondary questions just automatically populate. Who all is there? Are you by yourself?
Hmm.
Do you have anything that could be affecting this? Like medically wise, any weapons involved, that kind of stuff just clicks in and starts rolling. Whereas writing, I have to come up with all of it. It's not just a script, it's not just there for me. I have to come up with all of the words that I'm supposed to say.
Were there, speaking of writing, because you were just talking about how you had to think of everything, the words and between like what events were going to take place, and there's so much you have to think about. I'm a big believer in finding ways to slow down and allow yourself to not suffer from things like burnout. What were some of the things that you found helped you? Because I know, especially in 6 months, again, the average time for people to finish a book is like a year and a half to three, somewhere around there. And yet you did it in 6 months. There had to be days where you were just like the 2 month period with writer's block, where you felt so burnt out. What helped you to get through all of that?
It's gonna be really funny, but I'm dead serious. Turning on Hamilton, whether it be the soundtrack or the Disney Plus recording of Hamilton, and I would kind of get myself in this mental, like, place where I'm writing with Hamilton. I'm writing the Federalist Papers or the Constitution with them, and I have to get it done. Like, there's no option. If I don't get this done, it's like if I don't get this done now, I could run out of time and it's not going to get done. That, I would say, turning on the Hamilton, if that didn't work, I would start plotting out the book that I'm currently writing, developing character backstories and their different characteristics. But yeah, Hamilton was actually my biggest help in writing my debut. I haven't needed it as much on this second book.
So are you finding it easier to write book two by comparison to book one then?
Yes, mainly because book two backtracks a little bit, and we are relearning from different perspectives some of the events from book one. So some of it was already, which is not a huge portion of it, but some of it was already written. I had already had notes written down on how I wanted certain things to go. The entire book was plotted out before book one was even finished. So between my notes, my plot outline, my character building worksheets, and all of that, it has been a lot easier to do this one because I didn't have all of that for book one.
Yeah, I don't know why, but in my mind, I always think that when someone is making a series, that the future books would be harder. But I see what you mean by the whole you have those notes, you have the extra ideas that you've already been thinking of. So it makes sense. Backtrack a little bit here. We here at Authors by Us, we want to help people to go beyond just seeing you as an author and start to really look at your stories and everything. Today you posted a about the fact that you're a fan of Red Bull.
I am. I'm a huge fan of Red Bull, yes.
How much Red Bull are you drinking a month?
I probably drink one a day. My fiance orders them in like the flats of them from Amazon.
Mm.
We just keep them over in the corner of the office. I put them in the fridge as they fit, and then I crack at least one a day. If it's a long day, like today, the the first half of my day was spent decorating for a birthday party for my dad and I, and then we've got this, and then we have the party tonight. I'll probably drink two today, but I would say I'm going through probably at least 31 a month.
Wow, that's a lot of energy drinks. But now you got the reasoning behind. See, the thing is, though, is you got the reasoning behind being able to drink that many because you've got the your job and writing a book. So if anyone goes, "Girl, you're drinking too many energy drinks," you go, "It doesn't matter. I need those."
I do, yeah. And I'm a huge fan of Red Bull sports as well. So the Red Bull F1 team is my favorite. I'm a huge Max Verstappen fan. So that probably helps fuel the addiction just a little bit.
Mhm.
But yes, Red Bull Yellow is my favorite. The only one that tops Red Bull Yellow is the Pomegranate Festival or the Festive Edition, but that is discontinued. It only comes out in the advent calendars every year, which I did get. I do get those. I get the advent calendars.
What is one experience that you've had in your life that you can look back on and say, this 100% is what made me who I am today?
Um, Growing up, getting into law enforcement and being around law enforcement for sure. Um, it wasn't easy, but it happened. You know, my friends and my family really shaped who I am as a person. That made me who I was today. Without my grandma, I would not be half the person that I am, and I stand by that fully. I loved my grandma. She was my best friend, and I just know that she'd be more than ecstatic. She probably would have ordered 100 copies of my book if she was still here. She would be the biggest support, biggest fan. She'd be screaming it from the rooftops. Just how supportive my family was growing up gave me the courage to do and be who I am today.
Looking at your family in general, again, we talked about it, you're a mother,
Mhm.
work as a 911 dispatcher, you're a book author now, and you're writing more books, and all while having the craziness that this life has to offer all of us. How much of a support has your partner or anyone else in your family been through all of this?
So, my fiance Tyler has been amazing. Before we were even dating, he was buying me like a book embosser and autographed copy stickers. He bought me fountain pens. He would just find anything that I wanted or needed for my writing journey, and he would make sure that I had it without question, without doubt, would just make sure that it was ordered and on its way. He's been so supportive. He is super proud of me. He not the biggest reader, but usually attends everything with me. If I'm going to a book signing, book event, he wants to be there. He wants to be there to support me. I have a little bit of social anxiety, which comes from being a first responder. A lot of first responders get anxious around people just because we deal with them every day. He wants to be there to make sure I stay calm, keep me on track, support me, and just watch me thrive in my area. Like, there are certain things that he's really good at that I'm not. Playing video games being one of them. I try so hard to play with him, and I'm just not good. But just being there and supportive in his element, the same as he is in mine, he has been probably my biggest supporter and my biggest fan during this entire process.
It seems like you have a great support behind you. I want to backtrack a little bit when it comes to your children in particular, because you're someone, and myself, I'm someone who grew up reading, found reasons to love it. But as the world starts to move further towards speed, and that's kind of the biggest thing that's driving society today, we see all the time people talking about reading is obsolete, reading is no longer necessary. Do you see around the world, whether it's in the school systems or in general, reading still being a giant priority in the future? Or do you see eventually reading becoming more of an obsolete skill that maybe people learn every now and then, but for the most part never use?
Raising my son to love reading. He's got a lot of books. My mom and dad read to him all of the time. He seems to love it so far. He's learning some words. Now, obviously, 3 is a little bit young to start knowing how to read, but he loves to be read too, especially if it's anything Lightning McQueen, monster trucks, anything like that. He loves reading. But he's he is showing more of an artistic side. He wants to color, wants to draw, wants to paint, stuff like that. And whichever way he chooses, fully going to support. But I hope that our future generations grow up with the longing to read that, past generations and our generations have. Ebooks are huge, not a problem. They're
Mhm.
valid forms of reading. They're great because they're just at your fingertip. They're less than an inch thick. You can carry them anywhere with you, and they can be on any device. I see those being more popular than print books, much like they probably are already. But yeah, I feel like print books are probably going to slowly become obsolete and we're going to move towards fully digital, but I feel like that's just how the world is moving anyway. A lot of banks don't even send out paper statements anymore. You have to get them through email or whatever. So I think our system is just moving totally paperless. And that's unfortunate because as someone who likes print books, I want I want my shelf trophies.
Yeah. Oh yeah. God. I would. Anyone who visits me will say the same thing. They look at my shelves and they're freaked out by it. There's almost too many. What does a slow day for you look like? I want to backtrack to that because it seems like your life at this point is just
It is.
wild between being a mother, your work, author, everything else. What does a slow day even look like?
I would say a slow day would look like me waking up, not having any plans for the day, which would mean I walk to the fridge, find something to snack on for the morning. I grab my energy drink, and then I usually get to sit down and write if I'm off. That would be what a slow day would look like. I would probably spend my entire day writing, or if I get tired of writing, watching TV or laying in bed. I'm a very tired person because of how busy I am usually. So I like to nap a lot when I'm not working or when I'm not actively into my writing. If I can feel myself drifting from the desire to sit and write, I usually try to go and take a nap, watch TV, something. I only have like 2 slow days every 2 weeks though. So
I can't. I can't even. I empathize with you on that because, especially after we started launching the podcast and everything, it's just been crazy, the schedule and everything. But another thing that you can do on a slow day is concerts. On your TikTok, you mentioned that you're a fan of
yeah.
concerts. What kind of concerts do you enjoy going to?
A wide variety. I've been to country concerts. That's the kind of music I was raised on. I
Mm-hmm.
went to the Eras tour. I have tickets to go see Bruno Mars. So pop, country. My favorite concert that I have been to though is between Falling in Reverse and Sleep Token. Those are my favorite concerts to go to. That's just my type of music that I listen to constantly. So those are my favorite to go to. Those usually aren't slow days, though. I'm a huge procrastinator on those days. So usually that is rushing to get ready, figuring out what time I have to leave and get there on time before it starts. Because I love watching the headliner, of course, but I also like watching the openers. So like Slaughter to Prevail, Sleep Theory, Hollywood Undead, they opened for Falling in Reverse, and had I missed any of those, I probably would have just been over it. I like all of those bands, and really, that's how I discover new music. So to me, it's always worth it to rush and be stressed for the first part of the day so I can enjoy the concert and my time with my friends and family at the concert.
We live in a world now where anything artistry is just, it feels like old news. But there are plenty of people out there who wish they could tap into that side of themselves, but society and the way the world works just makes it way too difficult for them to be able to find that side and explore it. What would your advice be to someone who wants to step into that side of their personality, who wants to find that artistic side of theirs, but it just seems like no matter what they do, they can't be creative. They can't find that side of themselves at all.
I would say your best bet is to start with a pad of paper and a pen, whether that be drawing, sketching, writing. It's the most versatile tool that we have is paper and pen. You'll find your art form through it, I'm sure. Songwriting, writing books, drawing, coming up with sketches to paint, origami, I mean all of it. Paper and a pen. That is the best starting point. Finding inspiration online and turning it into your own kind of twist. Anything like that. But I always carry a notebook and a pen with me everywhere I go so that I can doodle, I can sketch, I can write, I can take notes, whatever I need to do. Um, that'd be my biggest recommendation is to always start with even just a piece of paper and a pen, figure out what you want to do.
Let's go the other way now. I want to get your thoughts when it comes to AI. I saw this article about a month or two ago. I kid you not, this woman who was working on a book of hers got ripped off because a producer or another company used AI to rip her whole book concept and release it before she even had a chance to finish. So on a future book of hers, she literally put a stamp that said, this book has nothing to do with AI. As in, this book wasn't, no AI was used in the process of making it. What's your thought process on AI in regards to using it in book writing? So, last time, Ember, before the technical difficulties, I was asking you about AI in regards to book writing, and I know you texted me afterwards saying you had quite the thoughts on
Yeah.
this particular subject. So let's just pick up back there. What are your thoughts in regards to AI and book writing?
Um, it definitely doesn't belong in the literature community. I understand that it's a very easy and accessible tool that a lot of people use. It's awful for the environment. It is taking away jobs from actual artists and authors that, put the time and effort into creating their own stories, their own artworks. And it actually uses their works to train it. So snippets of their work are shown in the AI generated content. And just in my opinion, it does not belong in literature, even as editing. I made sure to find a cover artist, an editor, all of that that was very anti AI so that I knew in the end that AI did not touch my book at all. In my copyright, it actually says that my work should not be used to train generative AI and that any use of AI on my book is strictly prohibited. So me myself, very anti AI in the art and literature area. Now I know it can be useful for some things, but generative AI is just not like in general something
Mhm.
that should be used as often as it is, especially if at all. But I understand people don't see eye to eye with me on that, and that's totally okay. But just my opinion does not belong in
Yeah.
literature and art.
Yeah, I definitely see your point there. I mean, especially when you look back in the day at a lot of artists, writers, and any sort of literature. Of course, they didn't have anything to help them then. And I definitely understand your point of view. I want to go a little further into that because I know for myself, when I worked as a copywriter.
Mhm.
I tended to not rely on AI because I wanted to improve in my own writing. But one thing that I saw that helped me so much was this idea of utilizing it as a coach to brainstorm. Because I think, and I know I asked you about this before when we talked about how people can find that artistic side. And I think one of the things that
Mhm.
helped me the most was just having the ability to at what AI can come up with and then utilizing that or incorporating that into my own writing and into my brain so that I could have a much
Mhm.
better time coming up with more, I guess you could say, saucy ways of saying things so that people would be attracted to the clients I was working for. And so, go a little bit deeper on that in particular when it comes to, do you think AI completely understand if you're just ripping your whole work utilizing AI? It can seem a little iffy. And I know in your mind that's 100% true.
Yeah.
But what if I were using AI as a way to brainstorm, maybe do small edits and just ideate and allow my brain to have more avenues to think and come up with more ideas for my said book if I were writing one? Where would your thought process be on that in particular?
I have used AI to help answer a question or something if I can't find an answer on Google. Um, but generative AI is what I'm mainly against. The create an artwork of me like this, pictures, and writing entire books. I'm not saying that all AI is bad, just the generative side that uses, a ton of fresh water that we could be drinking, takes up space from the environment. It's just awful for the environment. As for what you're asking, I've done that, not with writing my book, but like
Mhm,
when I was in college and high school, just a quick, like, hey, I can't find this on Google kind of thing. I need
mhm,
to ask someone else who might be able to deep dive into. Um, that I'm not totally against. I personally don't use it in my writing. If I'm stuck on something, like I said, put on Hamilton, I talk to my friends. We usually are able to come up with a solution on a plot hole or anything like that. I would say if you're going to use it that way, definitely like double check spellings, double check grammar, stuff like that, because AI doesn't always get it right. So I wouldn't copy and paste it. I would just take notes or something and then write based off of that. Yeah, no, I personally anymore don't use any AI, especially in my books. I make sure that no AI, generative or not, touches my books, just purely out of how controversial AI is
mhm.
and how, like I said, it doesn't always get it right. So it could say that one thing is the correct use of a word, and then you know I put it in there and it's completely incorrect, doesn't make sense, changes the entire structure of the sentence, kind of thing. But yeah, other than that, I mean, I'm not totally against it. My dad uses AI a lot. I haven't gotten into the deep dive with him on it yet. That's not a battle I'm willing to fight right now. But
Yeah.
um, definitely I just don't prefer it. And I don't. I mean, I might have Chat GPT on my phone still from, like I said, when I was in school, but it definitely does not get used. And if I were to use it, it definitely wouldn't be like a copy and paste. It would just be like like you said, brainstorm ideas on how to fix a plot hole or something. But like I said, I usually rely on my friends for that or go back
Mhm.
through, like with book two, I'm going back through book one and I'm completely like fixing plot holes just by rereading things that I already wrote. So that is how I fix that situation. But I mean, like I said, AI can be helpful for a lot of people. Just I prefer not.
Yeah, and that leads to the next question then, because I hate to say it, but we really are leaning more into technology, AI, and all that as we get further and further into the 2020s, the 21st century, I guess you could say. The the next question I have then is you wrote your book in 6 months. You could even say
Mhm.
4 months if you don't count the 2 months that you mentioned you had writer's block and you were dealing with that. And on top of that, you really weren't utilizing AI too much to help you at all. Would you consider, and by definition, most people would look at that and think, wow, this woman must be some out of this world creative genius. Would you consider yourself to be on that sort of level of, I had it in my head and it was the perfect imagination, perfect world, perfect characters, boom, bang, book complete, 6 months, done, let's go? Where does that connection come in? Do you really find yourself being of extremely creative person, or how did you go through the whole trial and error then?
I would say, even from a young age, I was an extremely creative person. Originally wanted to be an art teacher, and so I was very artistic. I still do draw and paint. But as for like, did I think that I'm like some artistic genius? Not really. I've played a lot of instruments, I've done a lot of art and stuff, I've read a ton of books, and all of that helped play into writing the book in 6 months. Just knowing, from previous ventures what my talents were, um, and then the determination to get it done. I would say that, like, I am slightly gifted, which is controversial, but I am on the spectrum, and I do hyper focus, and when I have my mind set on doing something, it doesn't matter how creative or not I am. I'm going to get it done. I'm going to get it done the way that I want it. And I'm going to go back through and make sure it's perfect before I send it off to someone else to look at. And then when they look at it and give me critiques, it makes me feel a little bit better, because it's like, man, I didn't even know that that word existed, or I didn't even know that that was the correct verbiage. So for me, I didn't feel like I needed an editor at first. And then I got to the part where I was, because I really thought, like, oh, my creative juices were flowing so well that I don't even need another set of eyes. And then I did hire an editor. She was amazing. She went through it and she pointed out things that, like, silly misspellings or random capitalization, stuff that I missed the first like 5 times I went through my book. So not exactly creative genius, but definitely crediting my how I grew up and how supportive everyone was, and knowing what my talents and my weak points were really helped in getting it done in 6 months.
For sure. And you mentioned something about as a child you
Mhm.
wanted to be an art teacher, and this led to you just reading a lot of books, and as a result you kind of had a taste on what it really took to create a book. So when you started writing your first book, all of a sudden it felt like the pieces connected a lot more. What would you, or how would you define what a great book is? Because I know this is a question that I've asked quite a few people, and it differs for so many people, whether it's the story, the characters, whatever you can think of. I've probably heard it all. How do you define a great book? And then how did you in turn utilize that when you were creating your first book, Save Me Brooks?
So for me, I like series that can also be read as standalones. So usually for me, as long as the story has a resolution at the end. Now, I'm not saying that's all of the time. I've read Harry Potter, I've read Michael Vey, The Cat and Mouse Duet by H.D. Carlton. The first, Haunting and Hunting Adeline don't have a resolution in the first book, but all of those are good books. As long as it keeps me drawn in, entertained, keeps me like at the edge of my seat, wanting to read more, even though it's like 3 in the morning and I need to go to bed. Something that will keep my entertainment peaked and my mind wondering what's going to happen next is what I would define as a good book. I finished Haunting Adeline in like 5 days, and then I didn't have Hunting Adeline yet. So
Hmm.
for me, it was like 2 days of what's going to happen next. And
Yeah,
it kept me going. So that's how I define a good book, is something that keeps me entertained, keeps me wanting more. And I don't want to be one of those like readers that's always wanting more from an author, but when an author puts out a good book, I always want more. And with that being said, um, the way that it bled into my books. My goal is for all of my books to end up being standalones, but a series as well. So all of the books play together, intertwine, but all of
Hmm.
them can also be read on their own and you still understand and can follow what's going on. So for Save Me Brooks, it focused on Sophia and Xander's story, but you saw subplots playing out in the background. Whereas book two is going to focus on one of those subplots and
Hmm.
the stories are kind of in the background. Um, or Sophia and Xander's story is still kind of playing out in the background. So for me, I like a good standalone that is also a series that kind of intertwines like that. But like I said, anything that leaves me wanting more from the author, I
Hmm.
absolutely love. That also means that I usually don't read series that aren't completed yet, just because I want the next book.
Yeah, it's like when you're watching your favorite TV show, you get that cliffhanger at the end of an episode, and you're just like,
Hmm.
no, because you gotta wait a whole week or sometimes more, depending. It's the
Yep.
worst. But to piggyback off of that feeling of wanting closure, right?
Hmm.
You talk about how as long as I can read a book and in some way, shape, or form, I have closure near the end or at the end, I feel
Hmm.
happy. And obviously, this leads into the series aspect. How do you want people to feel at the end of your books? Or maybe not books, but for example, at the end of Save Me Brooks, what is that one feeling that you want people walking away from it going, holy, this is how I feel now, and now I just can't wait to get the second book.
I definitely want them to feel like they still want more. And a lot of my reviews that I have on Goodreads right now are saying that people can't wait for book two. And I'm about 40% of the way done with book two. I started it in February, and I'm about 40% of the way finished with that. Now I have to go through editing and everything, but
Hmm.
I'm trying my best to leave people wanting more of the
Hmm.
stories, even if it's not from the specific main characters of that story, but still being able to see their story play out. Like I said, I plan on
Hmm.
all my books being able to be standalones. So we'll still see their stories playing out, but they might not be the main focus anymore. I want them to want more, but to feel excited that the main characters found their resolution too.
Hmm.
So, like in Save Me Brooks in the epilogue, you know, I want people to read that epilogue and then go, wow, they had their happy ending. I still want more.
And not to spoil anything, we don't want to spoil.
Mhm.
Go buy the book.
Right.
I actually am working on my next book haul. I usually get around 30 books in each book haul that I do. So I literally, you'll see if you see my messages on TikTok, it's literally me asking people about their book. And then if I like the idea, I'm just adding it to the book haul to get it ready for the next one. But that's a story for another day. But when it comes to your this this feeling of everyone having their happy ending, is this kind of the feeling that you want going through every book, or is there going to be a twist maybe at some point in your series where maybe there's still a happy ending, but there's this feeling that people have where, oh, this person, it's a little iffy right now what's going to happen to him, I have no idea? Or is it just tried and true, every book is going to have the majority of people having their happy ending?
I will say that all of my books are probably going to have conflict where for a second, or even for a few chapters, you're like, are they going to fix this or is this how it's going to end?
Mm-hmm.
There is that portion in Save Me Brooks where they are kind of like enemies. Um, but in this one that I'm working on, it's going to have that as well. So I'm not saying that there won't ever be a twist where, it's not exactly a happy ending, but it's an ending. Like I said, I plan on working on all of the first responders, doing book series based on all of them. So I'm not saying that at some point we might not have like a love interest death or something near the end, and then the happy ending is just, you know, overcoming that grief and moving on. But for now, they are all going to definitely the first two books because those poor girls deserve their happy endings. So Sophia and my female main character and this one which is faith, are both, they're both going to have their happy endings. I'm not going to tell you how, but they will.
Yeah, go
Um,
buy the book, people.
they earned their happy endings, so they definitely
Mhm.
deserve their happy endings.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to read it. Honestly, it's at the top of my TBR, so it'll get read very very quickly. I'll tell you that much. I'm quite interested. But you've put so much effort into this first book and now into this second book, and who knows how long your series is going to be, at least for this first series. Is there anything that you figured out about yourself while writing? You've heard of those experiences where people they go on a certain vacation or they experience something in their life and all of a sudden that has the biggest impact. Well, you've just gone through something that, to be frank, 98% of other people will never do, and that is writing a book, publishing a book, and actually being an author. Have you learned anything about yourself as you were writing your first book that has translated into your life?
Yeah. Um, a few things. I don't like being quiet and contained. I want to be outspoken, and I'm very headstrong. I'm not into law enforcement, so although my readers might like a man in uniform, I do not. I learned that both through writing and the hard way, but and then definitely that, like, my ideas are important and deserve to be heard too. I didn't expect so many people to like show up to my release party or
Mhm.
want to buy my book. And even my friends, which, they can be biased, but even my friends are like, hey, this is one of my favorite books. Like, you did a great job. Please ignore anything in the background. My brother just showed up.
That's okay.
So it helped me learn, you know, I want my voice to be heard, whereas like I used to just be docile and kind of not get
Mhm.
into conflict. But my opinions, my voice deserves to be heard, and that I don't want to be docile and quiet and content with where I'm at. But it also showed me who my community is and who my support system is a whole lot, because I will tell you that like three people had access to my book while I was writing it,
Mhm.
and anytime that I had an issue, they were able to go in there, read it, see where I'm at, give suggestions, help me. But they are also my biggest supporters because they showed up to the party, or they bought a book, or those three I actually gave, well, two of them I gave the book to. One of them did buy the book, but she wanted
Mhm.
to. Um,
Yeah.
but they showed up and they showed out and they were extremely supportive. So just finding myself through finding who my real friends are and finding out that like I don't want to be content where I'm at. um yeah, I found myself a lot through writing Sophia, the female main character, and I knew I would because she is a 911 dispatcher like me. I just needed to figure out how I wanted to write her. And she completely shifted from the outline, but her completely shifting from the outline showed me who I actually wanted to be.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. If there's one thing that you want people to take away from this conversation, including myself, something about yourself, whether that's a story or just something in general that'll help them feel more connected with you, what would that one thing be?
I am just like everyone else. I had a dream. I just was able to pursue my dream a lot better than a lot of people were. I had a lot more support than most people do. So if you're going to take anything away, just know authors are real people too, just like you. We are really hard on ourselves. Everything is not perfect, but um, we are most of us are firm believers that every story deserves to be heard. So if it's your dream, just pursue it. It doesn't matter if it takes you 6 months, if it takes you 5 years, as long as you write it down, even for yourself. That is all that really matters. Just let your story be heard.
Absolutely love that. Love that so much. And by the way, let's piggyback real quick. Speaking of your first event, your release party, which
Hmm.
already seems like it was a great time. Before we started recording, you talked a little bit about how you have a couple of events coming up, a couple of signings. You can have the floor. Feel free to talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so March 28th, which not sure when this will be coming out, but March 28th, 2026, I will be at Fables and Fairy Tales in Martinsville, Indiana. Excuse me, from 1 p.m. until 3 p.m. doing a book signing. I will have some bookmarks there. If you don't want to buy a book, you can bring your own book, and I will give you a bookmark that is signed, and I will sign your book as well. As long as I have my author copies in time, which it is looking like I should, I will be
Hmm.
at Fables and Fairy Tales March 28th from 1 to 3. And then on June 1st, from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., I will be at the Clinton Library in Clinton, Indiana. And they have a local author meet and greet there. So there will be multiple authors there from multiple different genres, but I will be there set up with my books, my bookmarks. I might have some merch at that point. And I will be doing a signing there as well. And my books will be on sale with, like I said, hopefully some merch. And then just a quick update. I know I mentioned it earlier. I'm about 40% of the way done with book two. I've been working on it for about a month now. It is expected to be released fall of this year. I have an editing date set for June. Book two is going to go back in deeper into book one's events so that you can kind of see the fallout of some of these subplots. But other than that, I think that's all I've got right now. That's all I've got scheduled. I know I've got another podcast coming up at some point. I'm not sure when that's going to be. And then I do have another book signing, which will be in Brazil, Indiana at some point. But all of that can be found on my social media, on my website, anything like that.
Yeah, and speaking of social media, where can people find you at?
I am on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads under author.ember.rose. And then on Facebook, it is just Ember Rose Author. And my website is, I believe, authoremberrose.com. I would double check that, but it's been a while since I've checked on my website.
Mhm.
But it's either Ember Rose Author or Author Ember Rose. I'm pretty sure that it's Author Ember Rose to match my usernames, though. But they can find me on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and Threads. I'm not on Twitter or anything. I use Threads instead because it links to Instagram, which means that my posts can interact together, and it has actually helped me gain more followers being that way.
Mhm.
But I am on most social media platforms. And I am currently in the works of also starting my own podcast where I can give writing tips as well as doing like a small like book club where I'll pick a book, I'll read it and then discuss
Mhm.
the book and do reviews. But other than that, that's where I'm at.
Awesome, awesome. And right now, obviously, you're doing so much in your life
I am.
with your full-time work, fiance, so I'm sure you guys are planning out a wedding, and then you've got,
We
again, the
are.
children and being an author.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself or I should say, going full time as an author in the future? Obviously, all things pan out for you. Is that something that's kind of a goal of yours that eventually you would
I would
like to just
love
go full
to.
time?
I would love to. My goal, like I said, is to become a bestseller or make any bestseller list, which means that, I have to find people to buy the book to get the numbers raised. But yes, eventually I would love to do nothing but be at home with the kiddos and write all day. Not that I don't love being a first responder, it has my heart. It will always mean so much to me. But I am at a point in my life where I do just want to write and have a relaxing time and not have to worry about my problems on top of other people's problems. Because, I answer people's worst nightmares on a daily basis.
Mm.
So for me, becoming a full time author would take so much stress off. And it's something that I really look forward to and really hope that I get to do at some point.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast, Ember. It's been a phenomenal time, and I can't wait to see how everything turns out for your second book, all these signings you're getting, your goals.
Yeah.
You have a lot planned, and I'm excited to see how your journey turns out.
I appreciate it, and I'm so glad that you invited me on. I had a great time. It was lovely talking to you. I hope to be back in the future and with updates, maybe hopefully the entire series completed by then.
Yeah, that would be great. It was so awesome to have you, though.
It was awesome. Thank you so, so much.
Welcome to my closing thoughts. I need a better title for that. You'll have to let me know if you guys have any ideas, but basically this is the end section of that we'll be doing on every podcast episode. And the whole point of this is for me to take just a few minutes and just break down some of the things that I learned from talking with the guests on this podcast, and maybe you can take some lessons away as well and we can have discussions about it. So from this podcast with Ember, I loved this conversation, and there were three things that really came to mind that I noted down that I have to talk about. So the first thing I want to talk about is the connection between her being a 911 dispatcher and becoming an author, because I think there's a bigger lesson there than people want to realize. So most people are out there searching for what I call their thing. Their thing. What does that mean? Well, it doesn't matter how old you are, what gender you are, it doesn't matter what circumstances you have. Everyone is searching for the thing that is going to make them satisfied, something that is going to give their life meaning, something that they can look at and truly be proud of. Everyone wants that. But the issue is everyone also believes that in order to find that thing, you have to be gigabrain. You have to be looking as far as the galaxy, right? In order to find the thing that's going to make your life feel truly satisfying, when the truth is, that's not always the case. And in fact, most of the time, the things that are going to help us to feel satisfied and be successful or to be happy are the things that are very, very close to us. Those things usually give us clues. For example, look at Ember, right? She talked about how she was working as a 911 dispatcher when her supervisor told her that law enforcement doesn't get represented enough in romance style books. Now, what happened? What happened after Ember heard her supervisor say that? Well, the first thing that came to mind was the fact that one, she's an avid reader. Two, she's always had this desire deep down to write a book. She just didn't know what to write about. But then when her supervisor pointed this detail out, all of a sudden, the details just snapped for her. And now she knew exactly where to go and what to do when it came to writing her first book. And now she's already on her way to continuing the Crime of Passion series. So again, looking at your life can be a phenomenal way to get some clues as to what is going to be the next thing you do that's going to help you find success, find happiness, and be truly satisfied. The second thing I wanted to talk about, though, was the relationship with her grandma. Now, when I heard her say this, you could feel how real her connection was. I mean, she talked about how she was very close with her grandma. Her grandma was the one that got her into reading. And when she released her first book, Save Me Brooks, she said that her grandma would have bought 10, 20, even 100 copies of her book if she was still here. And to me, that says everything. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about the book. It's not about the success. It's all about the connections, the people we meet along the way. And honestly, it's funny because it brought me back to the reason why I created this podcast in the first place. You see, because we as readers, and this happens across every form of media you can think of, we look at readers, or not readers, authors, I should say, that we admire, and we put them on this pedestal. And we think that they are these unbelievable creative geniuses who are on top of the world, and they deserve all the praise, and they're the best. And we could go on and on about that. And honestly, that may be true. That may be true. Maybe there are people out there that are just straight up creatively gifted and they deserve that level of praise. But in the same breath, that doesn't mean that they aren't human, that they aren't real people. And I think this experience with Ember truly points that out. Because think about it. The fact that she's talking about how her and her grandma were so close. She talks about her family. She talks about the fact that she loves concerts, she loves having slow days, just all these different things shows that she's a real individual deep down. And that the most important thing isn't for us to just look at how can I become successful. Instead, it should be how can I build relationships? How can I build real connections? How can I build out my story, right? That should be the most important thing for us because over time, success, satisfaction, and happiness will come. It's just how we get there is the important part. Or as they like to say, enjoy the journey, right? Now, the third thing I want to talk about is the fact that she completed her book in 6 months. I harped on this so much during the pod, and I want to talk about it a little bit more here because a lot of people would immediately think, well, duh, all that means is she was consistent, she was determined, and that she had discipline. And true, that comes into play. But I want to go one level deeper than that. I want to talk about when something becomes less of a chore and instead it becomes more of a passion. Now, the reason why I say this is because I've had jobs in the past where I could give 100%. I could give 100%, and whether it was me working at a hospital, whether it was me taking care of my mother, or whether it was me doing freelance work. The fact is, I could give 100% to everything. Now, I will say, I give 115% to taking care of my mother. We're not gonna trip on that. But the point here is the majority of the other work that I was doing, I could give 100% no problem, but I could never go beyond that. I could never give 115, 120, 130%. But the question is, why? And the answer to that is because eventually it felt like a chore instead of being a passion. And so when I hear people say that you can't turn a passion into something successful, whether that means just getting better at a skill, whether that means financially, right? Whenever I hear people say, oh, don't turn your passion into something because that's not always going to lead to success, it always blows my mind because Ember's story is the complete opposite of that. Mine is the complete opposite of that, where you feel like, yes, I'm giving 100% towards something, but it doesn't feel like I'm satisfied while doing it. Why should I continue going all in on something that deep down makes me feel almost depressed when I could instead be pursuing something that I'm going to be so passionate about that every single day I'm going to wake up excited to actually move forward. Now, true, you still have to ensure that there is some merit to it, right? I mean, for example, if you're looking to, let's say, build a business out of something, or you're looking to improve on a skill or something, you have to ensure that there's merit to it. Do I have a reason to do this? Do other people want what I have? You have to prove that there is some merit. But the fact is, once you've done that, a passion is going to allow you overall in your life to feel so much more successful than if you're just kind of nonchalantly going after something while not going at 100% or more. With that, I think that this episode was phenomenal. I'm really excited for future episodes of the Author's Bios podcast. And again, let me know your guys' thoughts. What did you take away from this pod? With that, also let me know, what do you guys think this closing section should be called? I'm thinking of some ideas, but I want to get your guys' thoughts on this as well. So, with that, again, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll talk with all of you next time.